Well, Happy New Year, everyone. I presume as you are listening to this, it's soon after the new year. You probably, hopefully, didn't wait too long to jump back into listening to good podcasting. Maybe this is your first time jumping in and listening to good podcasting. So let me just say, welcome. My name's Brian Biedenbach. I'm the host of the show. I started this podcast, a year and a half ago, I think, and was really consistent until I wasn't very consistent. And that's a little bit of what we'll talk about in today's episode. But if you are listening for the first time or viewing for the first time, I just want you to know that this podcast is all about helping you, a new podcaster or podcaster that is looking to take some next steps in your journey, create, launch, and grow your podcast. As we've kind of rebranded this year and calling this a playbook for podcast beginners. But if you are beyond the beginner stage of podcasting, I believe we still have some helpful content for you. So would love to have you subscribe to the channel if you're watching on YouTube at Summit City Studios, or if you're listening on Apple or Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts. Would love for you to give us a follow, give us a rating, give us a review. And let's get into today's content. I want to share a little bit about where we've been in 2023. It's been a little bit of a rocky road. You know, as I said, I was really consistent for a long time until I was inconsistent. And that's because this year life hit hard in a different way than it has before. And when I say life hit hard, I'm not saying any kind of tragedy, nothing really bad happened, but it was just one change after another. And if you are a content creator, you know how difficult it can be to navigate some of these big life changes. And so for me, again, it was just one after another, and it caused me to really take a pause and just altogether stop creating content. I tried to get back into it here and there, but it's really difficult, as you know. But I learned a lot on that journey of trying to restart and all the stuttering and stopping and starting and stopping again. And if you're interested in what I've learned, I've learned, I think, some really positive lessons through it all that I'd love to share. So if you're interested in what I've learned when I stopped podcasting, when I took a break from it, I'll link a video I put on my YouTube channel below in the show notes. Or if you're watching this on YouTube, I'll put it in the episode description down below the video right now as you're watching. But enough of all the things that I experienced this year, the good things, the things that changed my schedule and changed my content creation routine. I want to talk about some things that are coming, because in the midst of all that, I had some time to really evaluate and reevaluate some of the things that I was doing. Was I hitting my goals? Was I really helping people create their content better? Was I really helping people launch their podcast in successful ways? Did I really love editing and post-production? Those questions just continued to swirl and circle in my brain. And so, again, as I evaluated all of that, I came to some new thoughts about what I want to do with this content moving forward. So before I tell you some of the changes, let me just tell you what's staying the same on good podcasting. What's staying the same is that this is going to be remain a podcast about podcasting and helping new podcasters specifically create, launch, and grow their podcasts. You know, I talked about this previously earlier in this episode about this being a playbook for podcast beginners, and I really want it to be that. I want this to be a place where you can come and be encouraged. You can come and get some tips and ideas and talk about technology a little bit, some of the equipment, the gear that you're going to need to start your podcast. How do you craft an episode? What are some good things to do as you think about interviewing guests? How do you secure guests for your podcast? We'll cover all of that and more. I really want this to be a playbook for podcast beginners to help you create, launch, and grow your show. So that will not change. That is the core of who we are, the core of what this podcast is about. So that's going to stay the same. Some of the things that will be changing, though, I'll start off with something that you may not even know it's changed, because it's changed for me and it's changed my setup and my workflow a little bit. And that is that I am no longer recording on my trusty Rodecaster Pro. It served me well, and I still use this. I actually use this, even though it's big like this, I still use this when I travel and record with other clients because of the power that this thing puts out and the ability I have to mix and to produce right here on this. But it takes up a lot of space on my desk. If you're watching this video, you can see just how big this thing is. So I'm no longer recording on this. I do have a handy Zoom H6 recorder that fits in the palm of my hand that I'm using now to record the majority of my content, not all of my content, but the majority of it. It's sitting right here on my desk. I don't believe you can see it because it's so small and out of the way, and I have so much more desk space. So that's the first thing that's changed that, again, you would never have known that unless I said something about it. But I do want you to know kind of what's happening behind the scenes here. One of the things you will start noticing, though, that's different is the type of content that I'm producing here. So you're going to see a lot of me talking about podcasting, but moving forward, for now, it's going to be me, but you're going to see some other faces because I'm going to do interviews again with podcasters about their journey, how they've started, where they're going, what their podcast is about, just to learn myself and to help you as a new podcaster learn about what it takes to really get a show up and running and be successful as you continue to grow your podcast. So look forward to some interviews with some podcasters that I listen to. And if you've got any podcasters that you listen to that you would like to hear from, let me know. Send me an email, info@summitcitystudios.com, or hit me up on Instagram. Let me know the podcasters you listen to and that maybe you would like to hear from here on Good Podcasting. So that's kind of maybe the first pivot we're making. I won't say big change because we've done some of this in the past, but that's one of the first pivots you're going to notice that we're making this year on Good Podcasting. And the final thing that we're going to change here at Good Podcasting, that we're introducing, not changing, but we're introducing a new segment called Good Questions here on Good Podcasting. You get it? Yeah. Not too clever, but I didn't want to call it the mailbag. Everybody calls it the mailbag, right? And who sends mail anyway? What I need from you is to submit questions. If you've got questions about how to get your podcast started, if you've got questions about what equipment is best for you to use, if you've got questions about setting up a studio space, or if you just have questions about podcasting in general, send those to me on Instagram. You'll hit me up at Summit City Studios on Instagram or on YouTube. Drop a comment here in this video or any other videos, or send me a note again at info@summitcitystudios.com. And I would love to answer your questions. I'll read your name. I'll highlight your podcast. So give me a little bio and a little description about your podcast, if you started it or what you're looking to do, if maybe you've been doing it for 10 years and some things you've learned about podcasting. Submit those questions to me, and I would love to answer those or attempt to answer those. So I'm going to start with the question right here that I received, actually not online. This was from an in-person podcast networking event that I host here in Fort Wayne at Sweetwater Sound. So let me introduce for the first time this new segment, Good Questions. Our question for the day today is, what have you learned about podcasting just by listening to your favorite podcasts? And I love this question, and I'll tell you why. I love learning. I learn a lot, actually, just from observing, from listening, from reading, and just from watching. I learn a lot about what others are doing and how that can translate into something that I can do my way, in a way that's really authentic and true to me, that would resonate with my audience. So what have I learned about podcasting just by listening to my favorite podcast episodes? Well, I'll tell you what. The first thing I learned from listening to my favorite podcast is I love the dialogue in a podcast. Now, I'm going to do my best to create a show here where you can engage and feel like you're part of the conversation. And that's one of the reasons we're doing these good questions here, these good questions segment on the show, is because I want you to be engaged. I want you to learn. I want you to participate in this content through the comments and through the interaction offline, but feel like you're part of the conversation even as you're listening. That's one thing I learned about listening to my favorite podcasters is that I feel most engaged when there's a conversation happening because it feels like I've pulled up a chair just across the table and I'm listening to some of my friends. I think one of the other things I've learned just by listening to my favorite podcast is I don't listen to podcasts that don't have good sound quality. I only really tune into podcasts that have good quality sound. Like, it doesn't have to be professional. Most of them typically are that I listen to, but it doesn't have to be professional. It just has to be pleasing enough to my ears to not make me want to turn it off. So again, the thing that I've learned is that sound quality matters, maybe even more than crisp 4K, 6K, 8K video content. The sound quality matters a lot. So those are two things that I've learned, but I'd like to know what you've learned just from listening to or watching your favorite podcasters, wherever it is you listen or watch your podcast. So leave me a note in the comments below. Send me an email at info@Summit City Studios or hit me up on Instagram at Summit City Studios and let me know what you've learned from your favorite podcasters, what you're going to incorporate or maybe not incorporate into your podcast just because of what you've seen and heard. That'll do it for this episode of Good Podcasting. Thanks for joining me throughout 2023. I'm really excited about what we have in store in the future in 2024. So thanks for being part of this journey. Thanks for being here. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. I'll talk to you next week in another episode of Good Podcasting.